do you feel about, I mean, do you think he knows that he's quote unquote canceled, or that you don't want to be in a relationship with him because he won't make space to understand that you're part of the story?
I feel like to an extent, yes, because in one of the meetings before, my mom made it clear that he doesn't have my phone number, and there's a reason for that. So, but also I'm just not sure that he. That's another thing where my mom.
You're not sure he cares.
Yeah, I'm not sure he cares, and I'm not sure even my mom cares, right? Because they literally, to me and to other people, they continue to talk about our family as if everything's fine, oh yeah, no, my sister is good or something, or maybe she's not. I don't know what the fuck he says, or then my mom, because we are I guess living together, that I'm not sure what that means to her, but to me, it's funny, my friend have asked about my mom, and I've had to have a whole breakdown conversation. We're not close. It's a really bad situation right now. It was a whole thing where I was having to explain that, but they are not. I do not feel like that is their they don't understand that. And I think maybe it really is because of this proximity thing where it just feels like everything is the same and everything is normal, right? But I mean, it's so far from that.
Yeah, something here around them not wanting to face, they want to normalize what's happening in a way that feels like there's some sort of positive regard, and you're not willing to stand for that narrative.
Absolutely not, because then it would normalize the behavior. It would normalize what happened, as if we can move past this. And no. I thought my life was gonna end last year, my actual life. And I really felt like my daughter's life ended last year. I don't know what life she's living now, but it ain't normal, and it's it's not good, and I have no idea how to heal or fix that. And especially, that's another thing. I know how much of a critical thinker she is. I can't rationalize their story to her. And if they're not even willing to rationalize their story with me, what the fuck? I don't. It's okay, well then, I guess the same invisibility that's here now for them can just continue to exist. Because I don't know what to say.
What do you think the story they would tell Ariel would be?
Mom's crazy or something? I don't. I feel like that's the story my brother would probably live with. And it's crazy because the story actually doesn't make sense, right? And I feel like it's something that I mean, you have to be a thinker to think about this. So it's okay, so what is a crazy person? It's okay, maybe some people say it's a person who does the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Okay, maybe that's one way to think about it. Oh, it's a person who can't talk. Okay, well, that doesn't fit here. It's a person who can't think. Okay, that doesn't fit here. It's a person who goes to the mental hospital. That's what it is. Those are the crazy people. It's okay, well, then that's what it is.
Well, I'm sorry that they hold you in that position.
I can't. I feel like my new philosophy, I suppose, or my new coping mechanism is to just really realize where I am and what I am going through right now and the direction I would like to go in the future, identifying other people who would like to go in that direction and who have a complementary philosophy, and then just moving in that direction with those people, and just also realizing that some of the people who are aligned with me are not. That's researchers, that's family members, friends, whoever it was, exes, all those people, neighbors, whoever it is, if they're not aligned with my philosophy moving forward, there's just no reason to expend any time to try to. No, I'm not. I think it's just I'm not spending any time to humanize them. because they're not humanizing me.
So are you saying that you don't want to be in alignment with anybody who like challenges you?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm not going to acknowledge the presence of people who do not acknowledge my humanity. So
what does that mean to you?
That means like if civil unrest is happening because of like systemic racism in America and you can't even acknowledge that is happening and it's real, to me, therefore you are acknowledging that you don't think that Black people are human and you don't care. Therefore, you don't see me as a human and you don't care. So then I don't care about your humanity any longer. Where I might have before, now I don't.
Do you think your mother sees you as non-human?
I think she sees me as extremely flawed. I do think she sees me as human. I think my flaws outweigh my humanity with her, therefore making it sort of like she's unable then to support my humanity because my flaws exceed my humanity.
Sounds like it's like giving up on you.
Exactly. Yes. That's the way I would describe it as well.
Do you think that's true?
Today, yeah. Because that's another thing that I'm starting to realize. In the same way that the protesters and the rioters are at a place where they have no other options. They don't have the time to strategize. They're at a place, the frustration, the anger is too much to bear. I really feel like maybe it's like my mother's like Black existence in America, her poverty, her whatever it is that is already bearing on her life. Like she does not have the space to give me to like see my humanity. Like that actually requires like having meaningful relationships requires work, and that's another thing I'm really starting to see. Like the meaningful relationships that I have in my life right now, it's because I built them up over years, right? And I've like even though I feel like also because I told you like I was bucketing my life, so even as I bucketed my life, I put enough into those buckets for there to like be something there, right? Like where I feel like the bucket with my mom and my brother is now empty. Maybe like whatever happened last year, whatever little bit there was, it's gone now. I feel like whatever little space I had in my bucket for like, my neighbors and like those other moms and like, false friends and researchers who don't see my race or don't give a shit about my humanity. Like I had space for all of them and now I just don't. I don't have any space right now.
I think that there's a part of you that really needs to feel that. I mean, there's a part of you that fears for you, to be honest, because I don't want you to like wiggle yourself into this place of like isolation or cutting off all of your relationships. And yet at the same time, I want you to know that I hold that fear for you, and also like I really understand where you're coming from. Like I hear you.
Like, that's another thing I feel like I am starting to understand, that there's space for new relationships, but there isn't space for this like weird dichotomy where like I sit in ML world pretending like racism isn't real, right? Because like and I feel like I've tried to be vocal about that for my entire existence in tech, just like, yo, something is wrong. Like y'all should have way more people like me here, and you don't, and it's a problem. And some people being like, bullshit, all the smart people will win out, like you're tripping. And it's just kind of like, nah, I'm not tripping. Like, nope, this isn't good. Like, your things are not okay, right? So, I also do feel like, though, in order to do that, I feel like I'm really starting to understand the need to use my voice, like to use my voice to have an opinion. Really, just have an opinion, because in the same way that I feel so passionate about the researchers that I looked up to not saying shit, I can also be a person who's like not saying anything, right? Like, because that's not helpful either. So,
how do you find your voice?
um,
How do you access it?
I feel like I remember. Maybe that's a weird thing because I just feel like I've had so many conversations. I've had enough experience where something that will some sort of trigger a photograph, a talk, a song, a tweet, something. It just brings up some sort of memory in my reality that kind of sparks a thought, right? And it encourages me to speak.
Where do you think that memory comes from?
Just like my life.
Your innate self. How might you actualize using your voice during this time?
Yeah, like one thing I was thinking about doing, one thing I did actually do, I watched the Malcolm X movie over the weekend and I made this like photo journal of the movie where yeah, you have like these photographs and then little snippets. Some are his talks, some are quotes from other people in the movie, but it really helps me because I'm like, okay, we have been here before as a society. We've been here before, right? And there are people who like he was in jail for quite a while, and I would definitely qualify him as a person who's more knowledgeable than me. So I'm like, okay, if I go back and like read what he said, then it will like inspire me, and that's what I did, right? And then I like listened to a little bit of like James Baldwin, same sort of context, and I even started to understand. And I feel like this is so weird because growing up, I never understood Martin Luther King. Like I just looked at him as like a simp. I was like, really, you just watch people die and you never did shit. I guess I didn't understand the purpose of nonviolent protest. I didn't get it. And then one thing I understand now is the training that goes into being a nonviolent protester. Like it's you like the
hard work.
It's hard work, exactly. But you actually need some sort of training to do that. Like you need to understand what's coming at you. I feel like this is where I failed last year in terms of like what happened with Alvin. Like I didn't have all of these skills to actually like deal with conflict. It's like conflict resolution. Like it's really understanding because he wasn't so passive as though like he was actually out there walking and protesting, and he had many things to say. It's like when someone would say something that's like against what he said, he wrote letters, like the letter from the Birmingham jail. It's like I actually get it. Like this is where policy comes in. Like this is the reason that we have laws. Like that's the whole ass point, right? It's like but most of the protesters and a lot of the young people who are just simply frustrated, they actually don't know those laws, and there is no more Martin Luther King's like sitting there like explaining it and talking about you know like political action or nonviolent protest, or even I think toward the end of his life he became more of like a socialist, so even talking about what socialism is and how certain policy could work toward that, like I really don't know if we're there in terms of like most people who are engaging right now in the conversation. I don't think we're all there.
It's a skill not to react.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a big one.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to not react.
But that's another thing that's kind of weird because then I feel like it's almost validating those like researchers who aren't saying anything at this moment.
That's different than being apathetic.
What do you mean by that?
To be apathetic is to look the other way, or to choose to not use your voice, is to choose to be silent, is to choose to not participate.
Right.
Non-violent forms of communication or non-violent forms of protesting is participation in a really big way. Right? You're actually choosing to use your voice, your body, your energy. You're being known. You're letting yourself be known. You're taking a position. You're participating. Your eyes are wide open. You're looking right at the problem. You're taking it on. You're experiencing it. You're letting it come into your body.
So what about the people who are only being critical of the looters, right? Like there are people who are participating in the conversation simply to amplify looting and to call out looting for being bad without like even contextualizing the reason that the looting is happening or the systemic racism.
Well, I'd be wondering who those people are.
The Ann Coulters of the world.
Right.
The Ann Coulters of Twitter.
And it's a classic thing, right? Where it's like an inverse problem, where they're taking the problem that created a problem and the problem that is like more advantageous to focus on for the people who are privileged. They're going to focus on that problem and invert the problem back towards, oh, you see, the problem are this subset group of people, right? So it creates a hierarchy rather than being like, I think actually Michelle, or I think maybe it was Obama, put out something saying we need forms of nonviolent communication and nonviolent protest, but I totally understand why people are being violent right now. Right. I really have compassion and empathy for the people who are looting, and I totally get it. So we need both. We need like an opportunity to say like, hey, we feel the pain, we see the pain. Yeah, I mean, I would be throwing a temper tantrum too. I would be burning and looting and like, fuck the world. Like the structure sucks, and it's the destroyer that comes out, right? Like it's the archetype of the destroyer, but it's in the shadow because it's unresolved and it's so painful, and it's not necessarily going to receive the like light attributes of the destroyer, which would be like what we hope would be like the boon of the rebirth, right? Is to actually seek change, right? So it's convoluted in that way, and so people want to focus on the shadow attributes of it rather than saying like, oh, I see the structure is being destroyed by the people. Yeah. How do we use that in a way where we bring consciousness into form by saying, oh, we need change at a systemic level. How do we rebirth this new cycle of life? So I think that the people who want to criticize and keep systemic racism alive are only going to focus on shadow attributes.
But they're the same people who claim that systemic racism doesn't exist.
Well, right. Yeah, it's difficult. It's really hard. It's like what you said, what we've been talking about for months, which is like part of what makes systemic racism and injustices so difficult is the wicked manipulation that's involved in it, the gaslighting. That this isn't real. You have privilege too. You're born in America. You have just as much access to everything else as everybody else does, and you're saying, no, I don't. There's nothing true about that, right? I mean, privilege is when it doesn't affect you, so you don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about college or graduate school or money or housing or, medical assistance or vacationing or anything else.
Yeah.
Right? And that's not evenly distributed across society. But because there's so much pain in that type of privilege, it's so far suppressed. I mean, that's the only way violence could have been sustained for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, was to suppress that.
When we're talking about, when I'm thinking about using my voice, do you think it's useful to like to combat that narrative, like to engage with people who have that sort of sentiment? Because like I also feel like I'm in a place where I actually do have something to say about it, and not in a way where it's like, I'm cursing at people or really shutting down the conversation, but actually being critical of it. I feel like I have the ability to do that, but I'm just not sure if it's worthwhile.
I think if you want to come forward with nonviolent ways to really speak your mind and an opinion, I would fully engage in taking on
Why do you think it's important?
Is it important to you?
Well, it's important to me because I can't pretend that I don't see it. I see it, right? And I feel like if I see it and then, I'm apathetic about it, it's kind of like, I don't feel like anything is going to change. But I do feel like.
I guess I take that back and I want to be just like, I just want to be like honest that like, I don't want to make it sound like, well, you need to use your, I mean, like, I feel like even as, a white person of privilege or the therapist, like, I need to use my voice. Like, that's like what gets really, I think, important during this time. It's like, who is really being silent, and I think why we're seeing so much like burning and looting is because people who may be using their voices are not being heard.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like a little kid almost. Like there's a regression there, right? Like the child is unheard or ignored, neglected. Right? What do? They throw a temper tantrum. Right? That's their way of being heard. So it's up to who's going to listen and who's going to step in and use their voice to help. And it's a very complicated issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, however I can support you using your voice, I do support it.
How are you engaging in dialogue during this time?
Yeah, I'm engaging in dialogue a lot. I mean, I feel like being a mental health provider, I'm in both groups that are mixed socioeconomic status and mixed race, as well as doing that work as a white person as well, to be really upfront and aware with where I stand and how I shoulder with other white people and privilege, so that we're doing our own work.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It does. Cool.
Okay. Let's continue this conversation on Thursday.
Awesome. Okay.
Take care, Olivia.
So over the last few days, I've kind of I've thought pretty deeply about like kind of two things. The real like the purpose of like moving out, right? And then and kind of the possibility basically of moving out of the state, because California is really expensive. So I was thinking like financially, it's just like basically easier to move out of the state. But I obviously like, how am I going to have a relationship with Ariel if I don't live in the state? And it's been something that's kind of like hard to decouple, I guess, because I really see the need right now to like have my own groove or whatever, and like my own space with like my own habits, and to just really try to develop some sense of like normalcy for myself, right? Like I understand like why I need that right now, and it's just because it's just so clear why. But then it's also like all of the reasons that I'm here right now are also very clear, which basically have to do with like continuing to support my family, and basically trying to provide Ariel with like these wonderful opportunities. But it's just, I don't know. It's like I'm kind of conflicted on how to look at my current reality, right, and then kind of make the best decision moving forward. Yeah.
Is there a compromise in there? possibility of moving but staying locally for now.
Yeah, possibly, yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I have been looking at apartments out here. They're really expensive. And I was talking to one of my friends who's in Idaho, and she's paying like $500 a month for rent. And I was just thinking, like, if I saved money for like not very long, I could like live for a whole year there. I feel like I need that. But then I can't ignore what I think that Ariel realistically needs as well, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and I feel like this is a hard part. And also, as much as like I have, like cut my family off, like I'm still a big part of like the decision making process here. Like, there's just so many things. It's like property taxes and earthquake insurance and redoing, getting a retrofit, like all these things, which it's just becoming more and more clear. Like, if I leave, who's going to facilitate these conversations? Like, who's going to be accountable? Because
what's your relationship to the house?
what do you mean?
Well, it seems to be a really strong like hold on you. Like,
Yeah,
even if the family, even if you feel like you have desire to cut off the family, there seems to be like a very real, tangible relationship to the house itself.
yeah. I feel like because it's the only inheritance that I have. Like, I don't have a trust fund. I don't have a college fund. Nothing. It's like it literally feels like the only inheritance I have. If I walk away from it, then I'll have nothing, which feels
so you
shitty.
feel like moving out is not explicit from like you really need to also feel like you are taking care of the house in some way.
Yeah.
So that it ensures your future of being able to come back.
And not even just come back, but even, if it's sold or something, that, I'd be able to use the money to do something else. But if it's not there, then that opportunity doesn't present itself. And at least the history of like my family members show, it's like as soon as something gets difficult and they don't have like the skills to do it, they just give up. They're just like, okay, well, oh well. It's just like there's no like problem solving skills available, and there is no one else. Like, it's not like, oh, they'll just go to some other family member and figure it out. Like, all the other people are really dumb too, so there's no like there's no one else.
It feels really binding.
Yeah, it is really binding, but it's also like, I don't know, it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel from you that like this next phase of healing or work like may just not be able to be done under the same house as your family.
Yeah, it doesn't. Another thing, and I think I was talking with you about, do you remember where we left off on Tuesday?
Yeah, kind of.
Where is that? I can't remember.
Well, we're sort of talking about what's going, the world being on fire and kind of what that looks like and what how to be in relationship with systemic racism.
Yeah.
And your relationship to being in tech and how even the world being on fire as it is, the systemic racism shows up by it not showing up in like the tech industry.
Right. It's just it really, it's not just like it feels like, it's just kind of, and I think this might be the really strange part of being like proximal to things, right? It's like I'm actually living in Oakland in a neighborhood that's no longer like segregated, in around a lot of people who are not only upwardly mobile, but like they've kind of like been. But it's also like my particular neighborhood is just really interesting because like it has. I was like, as I was driving yesterday, I noticed it again, but there are quite a lot of like apartments, so it's like it's kind of on a hill, but it's not. It's definitely not the hills, right? Because like in the hills proper, there's like no apartments, right? It's like literally very like just single residence homes, even like museums, large parks. That's, you know, the way that the Oakland Hills are. And that's not this. This particular neighborhood has quite a lot of apartments, but it's like all of the apartments are full, like all of the black people who still exist in the neighborhood live in those apartments. So they don't have really any ownership. They're just renters, and they're like transient renters. And then I also feel like, you know, when we were having that conversation about rent being due and a lot of people not being able to pay that rent, I feel like these are the it's kind of like this silent migration of them also moving out. But I don't actually know if that's a coincidence. I don't really feel like it is. I really feel like there's a lot of strategic it's kind of like very strategic to try to move poor people out. It's been like no one really wants to like rent to poor people. It's not ideal, right? But it also is kind of like it just really it starts to rationalize some things for me, because it's not like I'm living in this Detroit neighborhood and then, you know, it's like all I'm seeing is kind of like the destitution, and I'm not seeing the other side. For me, the weird part is like seeing the other side and seeing it work so well that no one else even understands or has any incentive to understand why the other people like are not here, or why there's not even any pushback. But it's like because it's almost like literally being able to like selectively choose the premium channel. Like I can just flip on HBO, and now this is my reality. This is what I want to see. I don't want to see destitution in Detroit. I don't want to watch downtown Oakland burn. This is why I don't choose to live in downtown Oakland. You know, it's like it's those people's problem. Those people, not our people. Like we aren't a part of that. This does not affect like us. I'm not saying us as if I'm included. I definitely do not feel like I'm included. But
Right. Yeah.
it is definitely this apparent like othering where the systems are so well ingrained. It's kind of like, wow, all these researchers don't have to post or care. It's like some of them are, it's very clear that they're making this like deliberate choice to speak out against something that's like so clearly wrong. But it's like, it's optional. It's totally optional, right? There's no sense of responsibility that they should fix anything. And it's just been really interesting to see some of the more radical people who I follow just kind of really chat about how so many institutions are kind of like a part of the problem. Like people have mentioned jails, people have mentioned mental institutions, people have mentioned schools, just so many different institutions, and really like gave like examples of like how and why. And it's really interesting, at least for me, I guess, where I stand right now. I think I expressed to you how I met the one physician who was dealing with his like mental health challenges, and then trying to like reinstate his residency. And I feel like there's just so many things that he posted I resonate with. I feel like we have like this relationship at this point. And like it's just fascinating because I feel like he sits in this really awkward place that like I sit in as well, where it's like you're like a part of like both systems at the same time. Like you're a part of the oppressed group and you're also a part of the privileged group, but it's like both of these spaces don't see each other. So it's like many of these people don't know these people exist, and then these people don't really like know that these people exist. It's like it's not that they think they're invisible. It's more like they can't identify with their stories. It's like a fable, right? Like 100 years ago this happened, and like, and here's how it went down. But it's not like the nuance of the like everyday going through the motion, the tragedy of daily life sort of thing. Nobody sees that because like on both ends everyone has their like struggle story, right? Like I can hear all day all my like data science peers talk about how hard their like PhD program was. It was awful. Their PIs don't listen and they had to do everything on their like. You can really turn this into a story of tragedy. So it's like if you already feel this like sense of like overcoming, that you have also had struggles and challenges. When someone else describes their struggles and challenges, you're like, we're all equal. Everybody has struggles and challenges, and it's not clear the way that like your level of privilege has actually enabled you to have a whole different set of challenges that like these people don't face. And I think that's the part that's uh invisible or like unknown to like the other group, and it's weird.
I wonder if there's a part of that. I don't know. I feel myself pushing back too around like there's something that I think that happens with privilege. You know, kind of like call them like first world problems, where it's like
Yeah.
you know people who are underprivileged might love to have the challenges of people who were privileged. Like, okay, yes, you're overworked and your PIs aren't listening to you. Your PhD program is so hard. But, like, you have access to that. So,
Yeah.
what's the problem kind of thing?
Even when you're saying that out loud, this is the story that actually I have gotten that literal pushback from a lot of Africans who've like immigrated from like the developing world, and they're kind of like saying that to me, where it's like, yes, there's systemic racism, but there's racism in Africa too, and we don't have electricity, sort of thing. The problem is layered. I'm not sure, but what I do know,
it is. It's very layered.
yeah. So it's like I'm not trying to participate in the oppression Olympics, but at the same time, I'm very familiar with the problems that I'm dealing with, that like I've lived through, that my family has like lived through here. And when I'm trying to contextualize that, the things that people are screaming about here now are those problems. Like we're actually not having the conversation right now about you know, oppression and underdevelopment in Africa right now. Like that is not that is not what protesters and rioters are in the streets right now talking about.
Right, that's not this conversation.
That's not this conversation, exactly. And I feel like that's the part that kind of, I feel like a lot of times gets co-opted, not just by the Africans from the developing world, but also by like the researchers that who believe in the meritocracy, because they're like, okay, great, but like I worked really hard to get here. I did all the things, you know. I read all the books. You can too. It's like that's not how it works, though. That actually isn't my reality.
Seems like you also have like